Hi everybody, we're here again for another fantastic episode of the A to Z of Property Strategies with the DJ David Clouter, and we're down under.
And
Does that mean we're in Australia, David?
we might be, but also I've got to point out at this point that we are the newly christened professors of property.
We are indeed. Thank you very much, audience. You've given us a nickname which seems to be spreading. Professors of Property. So, from the Professors of Property, your A to Z strategy session this week is live, coming from DJ David Clouter's
20,000 leagues under the sea, we are in a submarine and it's not even yellow.
Well, there you go. We're underwater. So, if you hear any boop, boop, boop sounds, you obviously know what that is. That's our sonar system going off. So, David, where are we up to with A to Z's today?
We are into the letter N, and I was just thinking, Andrew, that I would like to propose on this broadcast a little deal. So here's the thing: you will give me your house and garden. You'll move out. You'll carry on paying all the bills, but on my side of the thing, because I'm not an ungenerous fella, you'll be allowed to spend a weekend a year here. How does that sound?
I don't think that's a very good negotiation, David. I think you need some lessons.
Okay, what's the right way to do it?
Well, are you asking me to give some top tips on negotiation?
If you wouldn't mind, because N is for negotiation. That's the most important N word there is, I think.
Well, I think that sounds pretty cool. Well, on that note, let's have a look at negotiation then. I mean, let's break it down to start with for our esteemed viewers. And I must say thank you very much for some of the feedback. I had to chuckle on our non-standard construction video just prior. One of our viewers suggested caves were non-standard construction once. So we had to have a chuckle at that one, didn't we, David?
I think we'll have to do a future one in a cave with some stalactites and things. Oh, get Niall on the case.
Ooh, that sounds good. That sounds really good. So, coming back to negotiation, there's 5 key stages in a negotiation process. There's the initial contact and the fact find. You've got your desktop research, the visit to the site to meet the vendor, the offer stage, and then the closing. Now, to me, that's quite easy. So let's have a look at fact find first. What is the purpose of the fact find? Well, the first thing is to identify what the vendor wants or what the buyer wants if you're selling. And what you need to do is find out all about the opportunity that is there. You've got to ask the person's permission to ask their questions. A good way of doing this is say, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? Once they've given you permission to ask questions, guess what you can do? Keep asking those awkward questions that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to ask if you hadn't asked that key question right at the start. And I always say when negotiating, and I've got a very good friend, René de Koning, and he's an expert in body language, listen carefully to the language they use. Not just the verbal body language, not just the verbal language, but the body language as well. And try and analyse, are they treating this just like a transaction, or are they emotionally involved? Because if you're negotiating with somebody and they're emotionally involved, that gives you an advantage in the negotiation if you're transactionally involved. However, if you need them to be emotionally involved, you need to learn words to move them from transactional to emotional, to get them into that emotional state. It's also really, really important to listen to the tone. It's just as important as the words they use, because if I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, David, we're talking negotiation again, I don't sound engaged. I don't sound committed. I sound bored. So tone is really important. And whenever you start, always start with asking some relaxation questions, just to get the guard down. Talk about the property, talk about the weather, talk about stuff that gets their them into a relaxed state. And then you can move on into those probing, awkward questions. So, what's the problem? Why are you moving? How did this come about? Always look at trying to use tactical empathy. If you can spot that there's something not right, they're fidgeting or they're not feeling in a good place, pose a question. Seems like something is bothering you, or seems like you're not open to that suggestion of perhaps a lease option. Once you've sort of built up that knowledge base, which is what a lot of people would call rapport, you can then start researching to the property, the vendor, the market. Now, this is where Google Maps is really useful. Databases such as Nimbus, planning portals, land registry, prop data, flood maps, Article 4, maps on local authority planning portals. They'll give you an idea about what you can do with the property. And then, once you've got an idea, you can then research the vendor. If it's a business, look them up on Companies House, trade press, industry and sector news. If the vendor is a person, you might find they're a director on Companies House if you're buying their private house. Look them up on social media. Stalk them. Stalk them on social media. The reason you stalk them on social media is you'll learn what their language pattern is. And then you can use that language pattern in your negotiation. And you can also work out their motivations, because often people will post daft things on social media like, had a row with the missus and now we're getting divorced. Guess what? Golden tip there. You've just found out an in as to why they're selling. So, next thing to do is research the market. What are the comparables in the area? Once you know the comparables, you know what it is that the person will probably ask for. You also know the demand. You can use Goad maps to suss out demand. A Goad map is what you use in commercial property, and it tells you the occupants of all the other properties around. You can use Street View, and that will also tell you the nature of the neighbourhood. You can look at the time to sell. Certain times a year are better. David and I have covered this before. August, the market tends to go away. Again, just before Christmas, the market is flat. So don't try and time a sale in those windows, because you've not got the maximum number of buyers unless you're in a COVID situation. Look at what properties are at risk nearby as well, because you could have properties which are very dilapidated, and that pulls down the values in an area. So although your vendor might have the best property in the area, because of the rundown nature, you're in a negotiation strong point. Now, whenever you negotiate, don't ever try and be the smartest person in the room. Always let the vendor or the person you're negotiating with think that they're slightly smarter than you. And when you are talking to somebody, a couple of key questions that I tend to ask that really do work and get to the nub of the meat of the bones is, in my experience, I find sellers have a common concern about. And then that could be followed with the price, the transaction failing, and then I'll follow that up with, what are your concerns? And then I zip and let them talk and tell me what their concerns are. Because once you've got their concerns, you can then structure your deal around what it is that they want. Then if you're negotiating and talking through something, you propose something and they go, nah, I'm not happy with that. What would you like to see happen? That's a really great disarming phrase, because it takes it off your suggestion and gets them to come back with a counter suggestion. You then understand where they are. Could be you're asking them how much they're looking for. Or if they ask you to do something that's really, really difficult and they know it's going to be difficult, like pay above the market price and you've got comparables that you've said, well, these are the comparables, you could pose them a question: how am I supposed to give you more money than the market price? And get them to see the bad logic in what they've proposed. Could be that you're looking to do a lease option, and what you might do is say, well, listen, I could offer you the full asking price that you're looking for, or I could turn around and give you this lower offer, but it means I give you all the cash now. They'll come back and say, what do you mean? Well, if I pay you the asking price in instalments, would you be happy? If they say, yeah, but what would the instalments look like? What would you like the instalments to look like? So you can frame this around questions back to them, answering a question with a question, almost like a politician does. So with the visit, you've built up your knowledge beforehand. You've identified the purpose of the meet. Now you're going to probe their circumstances in a little bit more detail face to face and validate what you've done either on your desktop or over the phone or in a first meeting. And what we're going to do is try and avoid triggering scripted answers. So, morning David, how are you?
Morning Andrew, how are you?
I'm awesome, thank you. Now that's a scripted conversation there, where I knew he would say, how are you? And I've answered, I'm awesome. So it's a scripted answer. And the purpose of this is to avoid those scripted answers, because you don't want them to come back with closed questions. And you want to be using this meeting to build upon the research that you've done and to get them to know, like, and trust you. If they know, like, and trust you, that is typically wrapped up and called rapport. And that's what we're aiming for here. Now, the offer is the next stage in this. And what we're looking for is to reiterate and confirm their problems at the very start of preparing the ground to put the offer out. And confirm it in small bite-sized chunks. I understand that you need to move by the end of the month. Is that correct? I understand that you've got a problem with the neighbour next door. I understand that this crack in the wall you've been told is subsidence. Might not be, but just confirm what they've told you. Then frame the way that you put together your answer. If I could solve the neighbour next door problem, if I could help you move by the end of the month, would you be happy? And if they're confirming each one of the problems and that they'd be happy for you to solve that problem, then you can tailor solutions to meet their needs. Now, generally, you will negotiate around either terms or price. But as David is our expert on property cycles will tell you, there are times in the market when you can negotiate both terms and price, or where you're not in a position to negotiate both terms and price. Now, in a property market recession, such as 2020, where prices are going to fall once the stamp duty cliff edge ends and the furlough ends and unemployment rises, etc. I think David and I would both predict that. Would you agree, David?
Totally. You're bang on the money there.
Bang on the money. So that puts you in a position to negotiate both the terms and the price. Now, if you can negotiate terms and price, boy, you can have some fantastic deals. So 2021 is going to be the year of fantastic deals. Now, how you build these solutions comes from knowledge and experience. And as we've been nicknamed the professors of property, we must have a fair bit of knowledge and a reasonable amount of experience. And I think Professor David certainly is somebody that I would like on my power team. So if you want to get in contact with him, drop him some messages below with your questions and he'll certainly help you out. Now we're going to look at closing the deal here. That's the next stage. We've all got to agree our terms, and we've got to agree them verbally, which is what we've just been doing in preparing the offer, before we confirm it in writing. If a vendor's saying, just give me a price, give it me in writing, then you're not at the right stage to start closing a deal, and you're not at the right stage to start putting an offer to them, because they're not demonstrating the motivations that you need to actually move this deal forwards on the terms that you would like. Always, when you've put an offer to them, agree a follow-up time and stay in touch. Now, if there's a sense of urgency on their side, put a time limit on your offer. And if there's not a sense of urgency, it's always worth putting a time limit in, because, listen, I'm a property trader. I do several of these transactions. I've got the funds reserved for this, but I can only keep it there for about 2 or 3 weeks, because I generally do 2 or 3 deals every month, and therefore those funds will be ring-fenced for another transaction. So it's a really useful negotiation tool to have time limits. And again, if they put a new obstacle in the way at this point, just go back to the previous steps and solve those problems before you start trying to close the deal. You'll never close it if there's a problem. And if it doesn't match your profile, well, find somebody who will buy that lead from you. Or a really top tip here is introduce it to an estate agent, because an estate agent, if you've ever looked at their job, it's basically to get a phone book, pick up the phone and phone people. Hello, you thinking of selling your house? It's a thankless job. That, or they shove leaflets through the door. Now, if you start introducing motivated sellers to them, all of a sudden they love you, because they've got buyers and you've just introduced the seller without them having to go through hours and hours, hundreds of hours of phone calls to get new clients on board. Now, again, another top tip here, people out there, from the feedback on our questions, like the rent-to-rent strategy. So if you like the rent-to-rent strategy, first of all, you can talk to the agent in concepts, not details. Also, agents have lost fees from tenants because of the fee ban that came in last summer. Now, a really great one is, listen, I'm a corporate client. As a corporate client, I'm happy to pay you a fee for introducing a landlord who'd like a guaranteed rent. Guess what? All of a sudden the agent's going, hang on, I'm getting paid for every tenant that I introduce. I'm not getting paid if it's a normal retail customer, but I'm getting paid if I introduce them to you. Yeah, and I'm looking to do, shall we say, 1 deal a week and I'll pay you £500. He's all of a sudden going, ka-ching, 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 that's £26,000 I can earn from introducing properties to this person. Really top tip there. Think about it from the agent's perspective. You've got to get the agent on board. They're motivated by one thing and one thing only. And what is it, David?
It's this, the folding stuff.
The folding stuff, they're commissions. So, whenever you're negotiating with somebody, avoid jargon at all costs. David said the folding stuff. Bit of jargon there. Commission, money, moolah. Aim your language as though you're talking to a 12-year-old. If you aim your language at a 12-year-old, nobody feels embarrassed about saying, listen, I understand that. Can you go up a level? David, do you feel embarrassed if you have to say to me, Andrew, I don't understand?
Well...
Everybody feels embarrassed about saying they don't understand. So keep your language really simple and frame your questions to fish out their concerns and their needs. And a great one, in my experience, I find sellers have got common concerns. Price, transaction falling over. It could be that they've had a number of transactions fall over. So you can just play on that concern. Well, here's my bank statement that shows I've got the funds. I'm able to complete on this quite quickly. Would that be of interest to you? And that's a really, really great way of doing things, in my opinion. So some really powerful statements I use in negotiation is, may I ask you some questions? How will this be better than? Not how better will this be than. How will this be better than? Sorry, I'll get my language right. How quickly would you like to do this transaction? How would it make you feel if? And what would you like to see happen? And one really key word never to use in negotiations, and you'll notice I've missed this out of this top tips session on negotiation, and that's the word. What's the word, David? Do you know the word?
Gimme?
No.
Oh, that's a good question then. Must?
No. I'm liking this game. I'll save your embarrassment here. Don't use the word why. And the reason you don't use the word why is it's a negative word. Because, David, when you were 2 years old, remember those days?
Why?
And you spilt your mug of milk on the floor.
Yeah.
What did your mum say?
Yeah.
David, why did you do that?
Yes.
And then,
how did you
got
know
a little
anyway?
bit older, you were 5 or 6, and you had a big plate full of sprouts and cabbage. What did your mum say?
Why didn't you eat those?
Correct. And then you were a little bit older, you were about 14, you were at secondary school, and you hadn't done your homework, and what did the teacher say?
Why are you such a lazy individual?
Yes.
Only putting it a bit more colourfully.
A bit more colourfully, probably, yes. So you get the idea. Why always starts a question that's a negative question. And subliminally and psychologically in here, we've been brought up and programmed that why puts us on the defensive. So if you're trying to negotiate with somebody, do you want them to be on the defensive? I don't think so. You want them to be relaxed and open. So how, what, when, where, who? 5 great questions. Why? So, that wraps it up for my negotiation session today. David, have you learnt anything?
Absolutely outstanding. I'm going to rephrase all that, and I'll have your house by the end of the week.
I should think so too.
And in the meantime, I've got the most wonderful neighbours next door. But in the very unlikely event, okay, that there was a hostage situation next door, I'd get that fella Chris Voss in to sort that, and then I'd use your tips to get that newly vacant property.
That sounds an absolute dreamboat. And as it happens, I can just hear that there must be some property nearby, because that sonar's going off. Can you hear
Periscope, let's take a look.
Yeah, up we go.
All those deals are out there, so go out there, grab them, and very best of luck, every success in clinching those deals with those absolutely top tips from you, Andrew.
Well, thank you very much, David. I hope it's been useful to you guys out there. If you've got a top tip, drop it in the box below. I'd love to hear what you use and what you do when negotiating, because what do I know?
Well, yeah.
I'm just an accountant. I've worked in a law firm, a bank. I don't know anything. Grew up on building sites too.
But going in there and going, you want how much? No way, isn't going to progress the negotiation very quickly, and it's going to lead to the old door slamming. You won't get over the doorstep even.
Nope, not at all.
Take
not
good
at
care.
All. So,
see you
on
next
that
week.
note, I think we'd better wrap for today, because it's been, 24 minutes
Wow.
of me negotiating with David, and I don't know who you think got the upper hand out of that one.
We'll leave that question open.
Absolutely. So it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
All the best. Ciao, guys.